G'day folks, we're having a look at something slightly different through the survival content that I would normally put out. I've been seeing some people put out their lovely 3D models in their thumbnails and things like that, and I really wanted to learn how to do it because I don't have a lot of spare cash at the moment to throw around hiring someone to do the 3D modeling for me. But I watched a few videos on how to do it, and here is actually the final product that I managed to actually render out myself. And this one's actually looking pretty good. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to redo this Anki, and you can see some of the things that I've been learning along the way. And I guess for those people who know what they're doing, you possibly can critique a little bit about what I've been doing, and maybe I can learn some better ways of doing it all. So first things first, let's open up a fresh Blender. Alright, so we're using Blender to do all the 3D work. There's a few things that are actually in here already. If we have a look at what's going on, there's a PSK importer that has been installed as an add-on, and that allows us to actually bring the models in. And I'm using the, what was it called, UE Modeler. Let's go and have a look in there. So if we find our Steam apps, Common Arc. Okay, so this UE model application, which you can basically download, it allows you to extract the models from the interface. You can do the same thing from the actual Unreal Engine itself. You can just export things if you really want to, but by running UE Modeler, it'll launch this application. I can then browse through the folder structures and actually find what it is I'm looking for. So in this case, with Primal Earth, we can find the Anki. We can pick the Anki asset and then open it, and it will actually show us a little sort of I guess a short of what it is that we're actually going to be getting. I can go back to the main menu. O's the shortcut for that. I was doing a lot of stuff with the human model, and I'm still working that one out. But it's coming along. We should be able to find the base. Where's the human male, first person view, third person view. So we want third person, open that. And so yeah, you get the human model. I've been basically trying to muck around with this to see if I could actually make thumbnails with this model. And once you've actually chosen the one that you want, you highlight it, hit export, and it will export it to your chosen folder. And I basically have a folder already set up for this. So my UE model folder. So under here we have an export folder, and in there we'll find all the Anki assets that we're actually playing around with. So there's a number of interesting things in there which we're about to get into. But now that that has happened, in Blender we've basically gone to our preferences, we've downloaded our PSK importer, and once that's basically been enabled, you can then import a PSK. We'll search the folder where we've actually downloaded it, Primal Earth Dinos Anki, and there'll be the Anki PSK. Import that, and we get a nice grayscale model of the Anki. First things first, we smooth it so that it's not all polygons and things like that. There are some bones, and this is basically going to be used for posing it and things like that. Not really going to be touching on the posing. It's more about the coloring this time around, because this is where I've been doing a lot of my efforts. A lot of the stuff out there, and we'll see that very, very soon, but everything seemed to be quite manual in the way that they were doing colors. You would actually take the texture file, use the various maps, and then use things like Photoshop and all that other stuff to actually color the image the way that you wanted it, whereas I've been trying to do it all within Blender itself. But now that we've got this model, we won't worry too much about the layout and the modeling, because that's where we're going to basically be changing its pose and all the rest of that. We can just jump straight to the shading, and we end up with a little bit of a scene with the Anki. Just get that nicely centered. So down the bottom here in the slots, make sure use nodes is selected. We don't need principled BDSF. What we're actually going to want to do is, I already have these set up, but we're going to append, and this is going to pull in nodes that have already been built in other files. So I should be able to come into here to my previous Anki one. When I go into append, it'll basically jump in and grab all the things that you've actually already done in Blender, and we're looking at node tree, and in here we have the arc basic shader and the color mask. This is my version 2. We're going to basically want to pull both of them in. And what that's basically done is, in my node context menu, I just right clicked there. I guess you could also push Shift A. Under the groups, we basically have the groups that we've just appended to our file. So we'll start off with the Arc Basic Shader. Somebody else has built this. There's a lot of code within inside it, so there's obviously quite a lot of smarts there, and I'm reusing this as well as slowly replacing bits and pieces of it. But at the very least, I'm using that as a base for all of my drawing, and we're going to also want to add our group for the color mask. And this is the fun stuff, and we're going to be talking a lot about this color mask. And so inside the game, when you're doing coloring of your dinosaurs, when you're doing like mutation stacking, or you pull out the paintbrush and you're painting things, there are 6 color regions that you can play around with. And so I've created a mask which allows me to color those regions. In that directory where we actually downloaded a bunch of things from the model, in here we've got the Anki. So the layered, the normal, under colorizations we also have the D and the M. So D is the texture, M is the color mask, layered basically gives it things like the specular, the metallic, and the glossiness and things like that, and you got your normal map. And we're going to want all of these in here. So just one by one, just drag them all in, get them available for use. Head, map. Ooh, don't do that. And the D. Now I've accidentally clicked on the map and opened it up in what would we call this again? It's GIMP. And this is the color map here. So each of these individual colors, you've got the red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow are all the different color maps. So each one of these different colors needs to be colored something different, so that when it's actually painted over the top of the texture, you'll change the color of the dinosaur. And we'll be using this within the thing that I actually created. And what people would do is actually inside things like Photoshop, or in my case in terms of GIMP, open up the actual texture itself. We can have a look at it. So this is what the texture actually looks like by default. There's a lot of grayscale stuff in there with a bit of color that gets basically thrown into the mix. But for the most part, it's black and white, or grayscale. And then the colorization, we can drag and drop it in there. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Okay, that time it loaded. And what people would do is they would basically make sure we have the right layer selected. We'll add another layer. We'll call it color 1, which is actually the red, or at least it's color 0. So this is the 0 color in the game. We should then be able to select by color and pick red. And by picking red here, I've got a threshold. I can basically cause it to have a bit more noise or not, so it'll actually sample a little bit here or there. And by taking that particular one, all of the little highlighted areas are what I'm going to color. So I now select my layer that I want to color. We go to my brush, we pick a particular color, and you paint over the top of it. And now if I remove that, we can basically, how do I deselect again? All the fun things here. Well, at the very least, all the highlighted areas basically are colored. And then by putting the layers there, we can then choose those colors. When I export the file, I then can use my colored texture that I've built using GIMP. But this doesn't work 100% the way that I wanted it to, because I think Photoshop works a lot better. But at least for GIMP, it did a good job, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be able to basically do it within Blender itself. And so this is where we ended up coming to things. So at least for the normal, a lot of these stuff, except for the texture, it's very, very simple. The normal needs to be a color space of linear. It's the only one that does. You just need to do it, plug it into the normal slot. The layered, we're going to need to bring in a new node here, which is to separate the colors. Color, separate color. Oops, didn't want to do that. Oh. All right. So the layered comes in, we separate the red to specular, the green to roughness, and the blue to metallic. And you can kind of see when I've actually got the layered image selected, you get a little bit of a preview here. And you can actually see the reds, the yellows, the magenta, there'll be some blue hidden in there. And so we're pulling out the specific colors to give it a number that relates to those particular spots, which will mean that it'll highlight certain things. Specular, you can actually kind of see here that there's a bit of a metallic look as a result of the what I've done. Next thing, all right, to basically show what the map does when we add it. Now we're only looking at the head at the moment. All right, I've got colors that are all black at the moment, but we've got the highlighted area in black is what I'm basically coloring the mask. And so if I take my red color, hue, change it to red. Okay, so I basically said, all right, color all of the zero region in red. And so from the map, anywhere there's a little red dot or a blended red color has now been colored red because I've chosen it to be red. And so I can do the same with green. We can do the same with blue. We could go with the, I think it's cyan, which will be green, blue, which was yellows, red and green. And finally red and blue to give our magenta. And we can see the lovely color scheme from the original map the old colors back to the new locations. And we can now use this to basically change the colors as we see fit. And how is all of this working? Well, if I edit my color mask too, we can actually see the guts of everything going on. We have the input image mask and we have the input colors that are going on. In terms of the red, we split out the color coming in from that first item because it could be a blend of all different colors. But in the case of this, we want to mask the red. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all the green and all of the blue as a part of the image, and we're going to subtract it from the red. Now this isn't actually removing colors, it's actually removing, I guess what you call it is, it's creating a black and white image which shows you everywhere red is and where green and blue is not. And we can actually demonstrate this, because if I take that and I plug that in, we now have a grayscale model where you can see the white highlights is everywhere from the map that there was a little bit of red. Okay, and we basically take this back down, and so we could actually go this one, which should show everywhere there was a bit of green. Green appears to be a little bit on the spikes, yeah, and then the blue, which is on the legs. Yep, so we've got the little shielding on the legs, so on and so forth. And basically that's what's going on with that. And so by taking that little highlighting, we can then take that black and white map, we can then mix it with a color. We can take our inputted color, which in this case, the red is being blended with a factor. The factor is that map that we actually pulled in before. And so what it will do is it'll color everything from black to white, but the white will be replaced with the inputted color of red by using that mix. And then we go through each one individually, red, green, blue, and it goes on from there. Now, because we can only got these red, green, blues, I needed to do something which would give me cyan, yellow, and magenta. This was something that I looked up. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. This seemed to be the most simple way to do it, within Blender at the very least. If you take your colors, so if you mix green and blue, you will get cyan. Right? And if you use a darken color node with a factor of 1, the output of that you multiply by 2, and it will give you the color space that is the cyan. The cyan here is basically the tips of all of the spikes. And so if we take the output of that and plug it in, we should see that the white highlightings is just on the tips of all of the bones. That there and go back to the original, and the same happens here basically for yellow and magenta, using the darken, so red and green to make yellow, and then red and blue to make the magenta. Darken, multiply by 2, mix it all together, and then instead of being a mix of the colors, because the mix is basically replacing the white with the inputted color, we then, instead of actually mixing them to blend the two colors together, we need to add the color spaces together. So what does that actually mean? So let's say we take, what do we got? Magenta and yellow. Yeah, so that would be that one there, I guess. We can see here that by adding them together, instead of blending the magenta and the yellow together, it gives you the space that is magenta and yellow. And we could actually take the add from there, the add from there, and we should end up seeing a black and white version where everywhere there was a magenta and everywhere there was a yellow is now basically got a nice white highlighting. But we don't actually want that. We want the colors to come through. I'll go back there. And then we want that one there. So we've added them all together. So instead of actually blending all the colors together, it adds the color spaces together so that you end up having a nice output. And then we go back to our original. Okay, so we've now got this color map that's doing all kinds of funky things. And what we need to do now is we need to take the actual colors that we might want to do. Now, in terms of when you're downloading this, there'll be a number of these text files. And so we've got the head colorized prop, which I don't think has it, because the Anki's body and the head has the same colors. But if we look at the body, we get these vector parameters that are a part of the default colorings. And so what I'll do is I'm going to copy those across now, and we'll see what the default coloring looks like. Okay, all the colours are in, and the reason why I actually chose the Anki in the first place is because the Anki is one of the few creatures in the game that have all 6 colours. There's quite a number of dinosaurs that don't have all of the different colour spaces to be replaced, and so this one actually has all of them, so I could actually demonstrate all of them. And yeah, I haven't actually done it yet, but this will be some of the future enhancements. I'm planning on taking the alpha in each of these colors to use as an on-off switch, and so within this I'll basically need to add some nodes where if the alpha comes in through with a 0 or a 1, I should be able to then yeah, just cancel out all of that color so that it doesn't actually come across. I haven't done that yet, but it will be something that I'm planning on doing in the future. It's not quite there yet. And so we've got this lovely interesting color pattern coming across. It looks quite clean, it looks very metallic, but it's not quite where we want it to be yet. Because what we actually need is we need the original texture to provide, I guess, more detail. At the moment it's way too shiny, and the colors are probably just a little bit too much. They're too homogeneous. And so by taking the original texture, we grab a mix node, we want a color mix node, and we're going to multiply. So again, by multiplying, when we will go back to that color mask, the multiplier blends the two colors together. So we're going to take all of the different blacks that we see, the blacks and the whites within the texture image, and that's going to blend with the colors that we've actually given. And so what we should end up seeing is a lot more detail to the colors we've provided, so that they should have a bit of I don't even know what the word would be, but yeah, you can already see that it's a lot more textured, so it looks a lot better. And something's not quite right here. What have I not done? Ah, right, I remember. So because it's so glossy, it's not quite what I was expecting, and this is because it's the render settings. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix up a lot of the world. So if we go to render, this should be cycles, and then we want to go down into film. We want to make sure that we turn transparent on. World is fine. What's that looking like now? We still need to put the other stuff in there. Why is that so glossy? Head for the normal. Multiply for the color. Ah, there we go. Looks a bit better. Forgot that the multiplication needed to be a full factor of 1. Okay. Now we need to do the exact same thing for the body. So we're going to copy that across because it's got all the colors in it nice and neat. Although we probably could have. Let's see if we can do this. Oh no, we got to copy, paste. Nice. Get rid of that. Then we go to our files and we bring across all of the body stuff. Layered in colorizations for body. Minimize all of these. The N needs to be linear. Alright. Layered plugs in there. We want to get rid of that. Add specular roughness metallic. So colorized D goes in there. Normal plugs into normal. Map goes into our lovely program, and then boom, we now have a fully colorized Anki where you can actually within Blender choose the colors that you want on the fly and make them whatever you want to be. So yeah, very happy with this little thing. Back to the default. We need to now probably go to our layout. No, we don't need layout. Let's just go to the shading. We are going to want to change from object to world. We'll add a sky texture. This will basically simulate light. So give it a bit of an elevation, angle, some height on the sun. Probably 500 would have been better there, not 5 kilometers. Alright, that should do. And then when we actually render the image, there we go. It's got quite a few cycles there. Let's just change that. Not 3. 300 is a good number. Okay, there we go. We have a rendered Anki. Every time you move it, it has to redo the sampling. But that looks really kind of clean. I can actually see a lot of little... Yeah, it's the bones. Don't have to worry too much about that. If I actually set up a camera, we would actually be able to do some stuff here. I guess if we go to the layout, Shift A to add a camera. We want to move this camera. Bring up, bring back. Drag from the side to create 2 windows. Hit 0 on 1 to give the camera view. Okay, let's look a bit better. Get back, up, across. Yeah, we're good. There's my camera. I've got to learn the controls of Blender. There's was it that one? No. Was it that one? No. Anyway, as I said, I've got to learn the controls. Let's just grab a shot of the face. And then we should be able to grab this. Bring it back a little bit. Maybe pull that across that way a little bit. And then up a bit more. Boom. Alright. So instead of our sculpting view, shading view, this is basically what we're going to render, and it's going to basically render from the camera now that we've actually done. So if you hit F12, it will do the 300 cycles sampling until it's actually drawn the image that we've chosen to work with. Alright, there we go, it's complete. You can always just save a copy, boom, put it into my actual thing there, Anki, PNG, save, blend, Anki. There we go, transparent background with an Anki nicely drawn onto the top of it. So obviously, if you go to the trouble with learning how to use the bones, you can then start posing your creatures and get these lovely screenshots out of there. You can actually see quite a lot of the bone. It's a very interesting highlighting. Not sure it's exactly meant to be that way. Let's actually compare. I feel like my first one was a little bit different. I don't know, that's the first one versus the second one. They're pretty much the same, aren't they? Although those horns don't have quite as much detail. Yeah, the head's nowhere near as glossy. Ah, that's why. The first one I forgot to plug it through the Arc Basic shader, and now that's made it heaps more glossy, which is actually going to give all that highlighting back. Okay, that explains what I did differently. Anyway, I guess that's the end of that. There is a lot more, as I said. I've got to learn. Got to start learning basically how to do all these poses. If we choose this, we should be able to grab onto View Toolbar. Should be able to rotate these things. If we select one, got to make the bones bigger too, because you can make them bigger. And so each one of these things, you can grab a hold of them and you can move things around. That seems to be the eyebrow. Probably not the best one to grab foot. And so yeah, you can go to a lot of trouble to actually pose the creature in the exact way that you'd want it to, but yeah, not going to do that this time. This time around, it was pretty much just about showing off. We'll get back to object mode, select that. It was about showing off this color mask that I'd actually built, and I'm planning on using this for the human model, so I should be able to take the hair and the skin and all the rest of that and pass it through this color mask. I will need to do that thing that I was talking about with the alpha, and so when we come in here, I should be able to take the alpha from each of these colors. At the moment I haven't actually got it in here, but I need to be able to have some way to basically say color 0 is not actually used, and so it doesn't put it into the mix. So when it gets to this add point, right, it will just not use it. And I think I should be able to use the alpha, because the alpha can basically be a 0 or a 1, and so if you put into the factor here your original value of a 0, it means that it won't do it. So turn that off, turn that down, or you can turn it up, right? So I've turned off the color, and what that's actually doing by the looks of that is it's taking away the yellow, I guess. Yellow and green. But yeah, things to be done. Anyway, thanks for listening in. I will try and make these available at some point or another, so people can actually use them. And I found that, yeah, watching other people's videos, there was some stuff like the basic shader, which somebody had a link for, which was beautiful, but a lot of other people, oh, I should say a lot of other people, but the few others that I saw that were doing this sort of thing, they weren't sharing what they had done. And I can kind of understand, because it takes a fair bit to open up the editor, basically go through the Unreal Engine's code and translate what they've done in there over to Blender. But that's basically what I've done, and I feel like everybody should be allowed to have it if they want it. Yeah, thanks for listening in, and I'll catch you in the next one.